We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than we normalized greed, inequality, exhaustion, depletion, extraction. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. Sonia Renee Taylor. Welcome back for Series 4 of The Future is Beautiful. It has been quite the time to be off air over these past few months. So much has happened. It feels like we are emerging into a different world. I love these words of Sonia Renee Taylor that we shared at the start. She's a very cool Black woman who will be on the show at some point. What would it mean to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature? It's possible, and it's complex. It feels like many things that have been in the shadows under the surface have come up and met us face on, not just globally, but in our inner worlds too. I know for me, this has been a time of going into a deep process with myself, healing some deep wounds. And honestly, I do feel the sense of emerging transformed, stronger, more centered, with clearer boundaries and more connected to my soul's essence. I've had this amazing backdrop for the past 11 weeks, which happened quite randomly. I called Izzy at West Lexham to ask if I might be able to come and write for a bit. This was before lockdown, and I've ended up being here the whole time, living in a wonderful treehouse called Tilia, with the immense support of the earth here, a lake to cleanse in, many trees, and simply being able to lie down on the earth and let my body rest and heal. It's hard to know what the future of yoga retreats and big gatherings is, but I'm pleased to share that West Lexham is opening again in a few weeks if you want a nature break in Norfolk for those of you in the UK. It's an amazing place to come on your own or with your whole family, and yeah, you'll have a lot of fun and get what you need whilst you're here. It's been a special place to be as I've been writing my book on intuition, which also goes to print in a few weeks. Many things get born out of the darkness, out of the quiet. Hosting the space of our member collective presence has been an amazing gift during this time. The official themes of these months have been breath as life force, energy medicine, and intuition. And we've added in calls and explored foraging, as well as some very fun impromptu dance parties. We've been understanding the astrology of these weeks, which has been full power. You're all invited into presence. It's open to you anywhere in the world. And when you join, you get access to all the themes, workshops, and tree whispers of before. There's quite a catalogue there, and the vibe is very chilled out, no pressure to keep up, just amazing resources, inspirations, practices, and tools there when you need them. And some of the most beautiful souls that I've had the pleasure of meeting. People open to learning and unlearning, to diving deep. We've also been hosting some live events, which has been helping us raise the funds to get this series on air, as well as giving us a chance to gather some of our previous guests, which felt really important given how much the world has changed. We've had conversations from meditation and emerging back into the world with Sally Kempton, Around the Fire with Jyoti, Mac, and Nick Mulvey, What's Underneath the Masks with Malence Bart-Williams, and Leadership in Co-Creating a New Normal with Nina Simons, Zabanu Gifford, and Stephanie Mines. On Saturday, we host a conversation on interbeing in this now with Bayo Akomolafe, Manish Jain, and Charles Eisenstein. You can find details of how to register for this on our website, and all Presence members get the replays later. But I love that so many Presence members still donate and show up to the live events. We will keep doing the live events even now. We're back on air, as it's really special to be together in this way. And it's a lovely way to be back in touch with guests already in our community and to grow those conversations. We'll share some of the highlights here. This series is going to be a bit different. I feel that we'll lose the format of alternating between a man and a woman and just let the show flow as is needed. Sometimes there will be compilation episodes of our lives, sometimes conversations. Yeah, always this heart space. Something that is quite exciting is that we have been limited on our guests as I've been trying to do them all in person. And of course, there are many ways we couldn't align this. And so this series, we're organizing those conversations with people that we've already been talking to, actually, some for years, which is very exciting. We are also excited to announce that we will soon begin our new collaboration with St. Ethelburgers, listening to each other, listening to Earth. This began to come into form when I met Justine Huxley for our stunning conversation last summer. Justine was committed to finding ways that we could work together, and we envisioned this idea at the end of last year. For this collaboration, we will be hosting 8 podcasts, 2 as live events, which were planned to be at St. Ethelburgers but are now online for obvious reasons. And there are workshops happening too, including one that I'm facilitating on July the 4th called The Art of Listening. Listening to each other, listening to Earth, is a response to the urgent need for climate justice and to build peace with Earth as a living sacred being. It explores the integration of spirituality with grounded action through the lives and leadership of people of colour. For our first live event, which takes place next week on June 17th, we'll be in conversation with Rabia Abdullah. Rabia is a deep ecologist, herbalist, singer, student of the earth, and lover of Sufis. Rabia studied Western herbal medicine at the University of Westminster and has been a qualified herbalist since 2008. After her degree, she travelled to Ghana, where her time spent with a local traditionalist herbalist reignited her love for nature, with an understanding of the symbiotic relationship between nature, humans, and spirituality. So please do join us for that, and you can register through the St. Ethelburgers website. And next week's conversation on the show will be with Bronte Velez as the first published episode of this series. We were actually going to record it on Monday this week, but we were both exhausted and expanded from an epic weekend of Black Lives Matters and decolonization. We'll be recording it today, ready to share with you next week. And on that, wow, what a time. This really is an uprising, and it's so amazing to watch so many of all colour skins wanting to understand the system of white supremacy and how it's affected us and how this world is formed. I know it's been difficult, uncomfortable, and triggering as well. And so thank you for doing the work and being open. A few highlights of what's been achieved include changes in legislation that are being made in the US with regard to policing and race, changes in many companies' policies in many different industries around race, a statue of the slave trader and merchant Edward Colston being placed in the river in Bristol in the UK, deep self-reflection on race and privilege, protests all over the world. I heard it's the largest civil rights movement in the world ever. And it's just the start of this. The word anti-racism is now being used and understood. This understanding that we are all racist by design. And so it's not about just not being racist. It's really about understanding anti-racism and understanding fully where we are all complicit in this. It has been a strange way to end what for many has been a global lockdown, to come out in protest. And yet there was always a disproportionate number of Black and brown people that have been the essential workers during this pandemic and haven't had the luxury of staying home and staying safe. And there is so much complexity to understand, as the quarantine methods have saved lives, but they've also done deep economic damage to many people. And the UN estimates an additional 135 million people have starved as a direct result of the lockdown measures in this past 3 months. And you can imagine where most of those people in the world live and what the colour of their skin is. It's a lot to hold the experience of our own lives and that of the collective at all times. And yet I feel us expanding in ways that makes this more and more possible. I don't have the answers, and I wouldn't trust anyone right now that says that they do. But I'm happy to be here asking questions and be in this place of learning and unlearning, of integrating different perspectives, and to be part of a global community of people that are also having similar inquiries. This episode is a bit different, as I wanted to hear from you, our community. So I asked our patrons to share voice notes with something they want to share. Some of these were recorded a few weeks ago when the world felt different before the Black Lives Matters movement really kicked off, and some this week. I hope that you enjoy hearing these different perspectives. For me, the most wonderful part of this show is the community. Many were shy to share something and perhaps only did as I asked a few times. I feel that each of these voices are holding something important. Some were sent in as little voice notes and some from our May patron call. The first voice you will hear is our wonderful Lucy White, who has been on the team here from the beginning, writing all the words that go with the episodes and suggesting edits for the conversation and invisibly holding it all together. She moved on to focus on new projects that are starting at the end of the last series, and we'll be introducing our new team member next week. She shares first, and then there are many voices. Thank you, Mary Chan, for your absolute magic in editing this show together. The edit notes and all the files I gave her were quite a job. We also have a song here from the exquisite, beautiful chorus, which they just released last week, called I Rise Up. Please buy it from their website, beautifulchorus.com. Their music has been one of the main soundtracks of my Treehouse book writing. It's pure sonic, healing, soul music. And you can actually download this track for free, but it's done in the gift, so you can donate as much as you feel. And we end the show today with a tree whisper for me, which came through from the tree that is part of the house I've been staying at here in West Lexham, which I hope offers you something. It was also recorded before the protests as part of presence for our members there. And I felt to share it with you. It feels so good to be back after 10 years of this project and our 4th year as a podcast. I really feel so grateful to be doing this work and know that this is the year it comes together and we get enough funding from our community to really grow this, as so many need the voices that we share here. If you can support in the way of big donations, fundings, or collaborations, do get in touch with us, and please do join as a patron if you can, and as a presence member if you want to. If you can't, of course, please just share the podcast with your friends, share it on social media, tell people about it, and this way we grow. Thank you as ever for your personal notes. It always moves me and the team when you share, as otherwise we don't know, and sometimes I think about stopping this because it's a huge amount of time and energy, and as yet we don't have the resources that pays for any of my time. It often feels like a struggle to have to make this, and yet I personally get so much from having these conversations, and I know that so many of you do, and I feel like it's just time for a shift to come out of that place of where trying to do something good and doing something that's not commercial is difficult, and actually where doing something that is nourishing for our souls and that offers the kind of education that we wish that we had. You know, I would have loved to have been learning about these kind of things when I was younger at school and in university. I would love it if our mainstream media was teaching us these kinds of things, but it's not. And so this is the work of what a new kind of education looks like. And, you know, I love that these podcasts are just free and anyone can listen from anywhere in the world, and that all the guests so generously share their knowledge, their wisdom, their life's work with us. Yeah, so really, really feel good about being here, series 4, 10th year of this project, and making this something that we can really grow a team behind and do so many wonderful, marvelous, and needed things. With that, thank you as ever for your personal notes. It always moves me and the team when you share, as otherwise we just don't know what's happening. We make the show and we have an experience and the guest has an experience and we put it out there. But it's only when you tell us that we get a sense of how these conversations impact your life and what they do for you. Somebody wrote to me recently and shared an experience of how these conversations had helped her with grief and made her not feel alone. Also had given her the tools to come into that place of wholeness. And yeah, I mean, that's why I started this, as I knew there were conversations that I wanted to hear about what it really is to be a human when we take off the masks and we stand fully in our complex reality, a space where we can be in our hearts together, where we can understand like how difficult it can be to navigate doing like the right thing or contributing, and also a space where we can understand how the way in which society has affected how we feel, which bits are ours and which bits are collective, allowing us to navigate all of it with more courage, more grace, more strength, and resilience. It really is a deep pleasure and a deep honor. Yeah, I fully just accept the struggle of the past decade and everything that that's taught me. And yeah, and just really step into this series understanding fully the importance of this work. And I feel like one of the things that has happened during this quarantine time, as many of the things that we thought were impossible have happened. I didn't think it was possible that all the shops would just shut, that flights would stop, that people would be grounded wherever they were, that special visas would be given, that we wouldn't, in many cases, even be leaving our houses. Yeah, that we would be in this situation. And if all of this can happen because of a virus, then what can happen because of everything that humanity is facing as a global community, from the poverty, from the climate breakdown, all of it? Now we've shown that we can work together and we can make big changes when we need to, when it's in the interests of enough people with power. And so really, this is our moment to reflect fully into the systems in which we've been part of and understand how we can create systems change, understand how we can really heal ourselves and come into a place of wholeness as we honor where and why all this separation has come from. And we come into a place of wholeness and we create lifestyles and communities and society that is regenerative, that cares, that wants to understand, that wants to do better, that wants to grow. And so I really do feel like the future is beautiful, and the beauty is not this perfection, and it's not this positivity, like everything's going to be amazing, I'm just going to like close my eyes and hope for the best. It's like, no, like we're living it. This is the time that we're alive. This is the world that we live in. This is the bodies that we're in. This is the place that we find ourselves standing right now. And this is the place from which we can always create beauty. And beauty includes everything. It includes the grief. It includes the darkness. It includes the suffering along the way. It includes being able to see what's alive and see where the joy is and choose where we put our energy, where we spend our time, how we spend our money, and what we're really part of co-creating. Like, what is it that we believe is possible? And I want to leave you with these words from Angela Davis, which is, you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability, It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful.
The slowing down in space that I've been lucky to experience during this lockdown, which I know has not been the case for everybody, but it's thrown up some questions and some invitations. The invitations have been to step into new arenas and new fields of learning and work. As I've been doing that, the questions have come up about what is my role to play right now and what is mine to do. And I noticed that I've defaulted to some of my internalized models of how that should look, which are very much about becoming an activist or stepping forward into some kind of a spotlight where I can broadcast my voice in some way, or where I can make a very visible and tangible impact. That is where value lies. That also feels really against the grain of my natural way of being and doing. I'm very often in the background of projects. I was the writer, helped with some of the editing and social media on this show for the last 3 years, have felt honoured and recognised by Amisha in that work, but in a different role to being the host or being the visible face of the show. And different projects, I've been working in collaboration with somebody who's really the visible, outward-facing icon of a project, and I've been less known or less visible. And it's been a process to understand and appreciate that that is actually where I'm comfortable, and to recognise that the work that I do from that place holds value, often is recognised and valued by others on the team and sometimes isn't, and that's fine. I need to really hold the value for myself of walking a quieter path and doing work which is not necessarily visible. So, for example, as a writer, I've produced learning and development courses for I don't know how many people across the world who've taken those courses and who have experienced some positive growth as a result of them. My name isn't on those courses. They were written for clients. It's easy to feel that I'm not having an impact by doing that work, but I know that I am. I spend a lot of time pottering in my garden, growing veggies and looking after our 6 chickens. And both of these things are new additions since the lockdown, and they provide me with a huge amount of grounding. That can feel self-indulgent and really inward focused and not really of value to the world outside of my home. But then I was running a creative writing workshop online for a team who invited me in as a facilitator, and the feedback I got was that I brought a really peaceful and grounded and earthy energy to the space that was needed. I don't think I would have been able to bring that kind of energy without spending all that time with the chickens and the lettuces. So I know that there's value that ripples out from these everyday quiet actions, and I know that other people out there might need to hear this right now, because we're all in our homes and in our bubbles. It's hard to feel our impact outward when we're in less contact with each other physically. But just know that the work that we're all doing at home and in our own inner world as well really makes a difference on how we show up to the external world and the energy that we bring to those situations. And so I thank you all for that. And I thank all of the guests on the show who, over the past 3 years, who've reminded me of that and pointed me to that, and who have modelled a whole spectrum of different ways of doing and being in the world, and the value that each of those ways hold. And I know that the show will continue to bring those diverse voices, ways of being in the world, as inspiration and guidance for all of us. So thank you to Amisha and the rest of the team, and to everyone who supports the podcast for allowing that to happen.
Hello, my name is Ablaine. One thing that has been underlined for me during this time period is that our experts and leaders sometimes simply don't know. They're trying their best, looking at a lot of reports, working with a lot of data, and they're expected to issue advice and make rules. They are often doing this in a sea of uncertainty or even false certainty. This has highlighted for me the importance of looking within for guidance and not always relying on things external. Of course, I'm not saying we should ignore experts or leaders completely, but that we compare what is coming from the outside with what we're feeling on the inside.
Hello, I'm Nancy. I'm from London. I feel like since the global health pandemic, it's felt like a collective kind of upheaval, a kind of collective turning inside out and upside down, which is something that I feel I personally like, kind of following the huge loss of my mum a couple of years ago, almost a couple of years ago now, which led me to places within myself that I hadn't been before, or hadn't been for a very long time. A lot surfaced when I started to kind of listen more deeply to the needs that I kind of like had following that bereavement, during a time where I was probably a bit more like solitary and kind of having spells of depression, just feeling like I really needed to like hibernate a lot and restore a lot, because I was just so exhausted a lot of the time from shock, I suppose, and disbelief. I kind of, lost quite a bit of my, I guess, like passion and interests that I had been used to for a while. But during that time, I was listening to the Future is Beautiful podcast, which kind of like kept those interests alive in me, but in a very like gentle way. And a lot of those conversations felt kind of just healing and nurturing to listen to in and of themselves. So I felt like that podcast was like a beautiful, like gentle kind of source of support for me whilst I was going through a more like insular internal place that I hadn't either given myself like full permission to be before, but this was just like I absolutely kind of had to listen to my body and where I was at, and honor the process that I was going through, and that my mum had been through as well. Through listening to like a lot of the conversations on the podcast and hearing Amisha's call about joining the Presence Collective, I suppose I was quite like, interested in, being a part of a community that was also like listening to the same kind of conversations and opening up questions about ways in which we can like be in this world in a more like harmonious, connected, intimate and beautiful and alive way. Initially, with the call out, I was kind of like, oh, I'm not very courageous or creative. I'm not sure I can be a part of this collective or a part of me, which I'm glad I could just about hear at the time. Thought, well, what's the harm in giving it a try and seeing what it's like? And you can always duck out if it doesn't feel right, or if it really just like feels too out of your comfort zone. And what I found is, in a way, maybe the the beauty in being a bit out of your comfort zone. For me to even just record my voice right now is like unusual in the kind of like journey that I've like been on like up until now. Yeah, that like reframing of things that really are like deeply challenging, that are disturbing, that are like difficult, that take you to uncomfortable places like within yourself. Seeing that like, yeah, pain and suffering and injustices like across the world. I feel like, yeah, being part of the collective and like having kind of like weekly questions, contemplative questions that Amisha sends out. Yeah, I just like approach things. I'm finding I'm approaching things a little bit differently, in the sense that I ask the question like, well, what is this like challenge inviting me to do? What is it revealing? Yeah, how can I show up for the world, but in a way that feels like aligned, which is something that I'm still like totally exploring at the moment. I found that like the themes that we've explored, like rituals for well-being, and what's kind of like grown from that is just, yeah, my life's really opened up with more ritual. So it's just like it's richer in like in meaning, in intention, awareness, and noticing more synchronicities, open up connection to myself and like to the people that are close to me and nearby, that when I'm showing up for the wider community, it doesn't feel as exhausting as like it had been before, where, you know, during my 20s, I often was like burning the candle at both ends. And, you know, it was all very exciting and kind of like driven. But right now, I feel like they feel a bit more gentle, but they feel more deeply loving. Yeah, I feel like that is the world that all of our hearts really are asking for, that deep love and connection for each other and for all the beings around us that we see and that we don't see so much, or some people do see and feel. Not only things that pop up in my personal life, but things that like I observe in terms of like big global collective upheavals. I'm starting to like see them in a different way, and still respond, but yeah, in a more like responsive way. And I still have my reactions. Those reactions are still there and I can hear them. But lately I kind of like I hear that reaction and I feel this like response, which I suppose is like me just hearing that inner wisdom within that we all have in us. Yeah, so like, yeah, the topics and the themes that we explore, Amisha has put together these incredible resources, like her knowledge and her wisdom and all of these beautiful tools that are a lifetime of work. I'm just so grateful that I've got access to. Just hope more people access all of this like incredible wisdom and resources and tools for that deeper connection to ourselves and each other and the world. I wanted to highlight that work, not in the like work kind of another thing to do, another like demand, from the like initial seeding and like birthing of this collective into the world. Amisha just made it super beautifully like clear and inviting. The collective, the intention behind it wasn't that it was like another thing for people that they feel that they had to do, but just something that you want to do. And like it's just got that really beautiful, curious, playful and empathetic attitude around it, which makes the world of difference. Being part of a collective, it just like kind of helps you honor the commitments that you're making for yourself, or making in terms of like how you are choosing to show up for the world. And yeah, in terms of that, like, yeah, I feel like my whole perception of how change happens has also been like turned on its head, to just like see the beautiful like value and transformation within like beautiful acts of kindness that are really coming from the heart and from the moment. I think the wisdom that I'm kind of receiving from myself and from the collective and Misha's like workshops is that listening really deeply to yourself and finding that source to be a guide in creation of a more beautiful place for us all to be in.
Hi, I'm Almira. I'm in lockdown in South London with my partner, our 7-year-old daughter, 2 stepchildren who are both adults, and my partner's brother. I have really enjoyed our experience of lockdown. We've made time for things that we believed we didn't have time for before. We've been really fortunate that we can sustain our family and continue to work during this period, which has really helped. Yet we're still able to cultivate other aspects of our lives that we were perhaps working on and wanted to progress before. So we're having that time. But most importantly, it's the time with each other we've really cherished. Even though there's been fraught moments, we're deepening our relationship as a family. Our daughter doesn't want lockdown to end. She loves having the family time. I'm really enjoying the time with her, even the homeschooling. As we start to come out of lockdown, my biggest fear right now is that we go back to normal, that we get preoccupied with the doing and where we need to go and be, and we're busy doing things that we realize don't really make us happy. So I really hope for everyone that we've come to realize some things during this period, and as we come out of it, we can make some really big shifts, because that then ripples out, will shift us as a society, and we need change. This normal society that we were living in before doesn't serve everyone. This particular community holds this vision of a future that is beautiful, and we can actively head towards that vision.
My name is Desi. For me, this time has been a time of really stillness. It's been a time of just putting down my tools and saying, actually, I don't have to be busy, not with either, whether that busyness is with work or self-created busyness, like too much travel, too many yoga lessons, too many spiritual practices. I can almost see that those have been escapes. They've been escapes to really not do the work, which is being in profound silence and stillness, really taking the time to sit, look within to see what I really am, what's real, what's just things I've created, what are things that I've been programmed into, all sorts of things. And I mean, the work, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And there's a lot there. And I think I've just scratched the surface. But that stillness has allowed me or forced me, and it wasn't chosen. I've kind of been thrust into it. And that's what I've been doing with my time, or trying to do with my time, or at least dedicating some of my time with. But equally, it's also allowed me to question, to begin to question how I live, what I do, how I think. I'm hopeful, yes, but without actually asking those questions and really getting a handle on myself, I don't think I can really find those answers until I really start looking, deep inside. I am naturally very optimistic and very hopeful, but I think there's a lot of vested interests that want us to go back to what was. Part of what's coming up too is, like all of you, I see the need for changes. I see the disparities. I see the inequalities. There's the fears that this will just create more disparity, more injustice. But equally, it could also highlight it. The questions are coming, and I don't have the answer, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's an opportunity. This pause is creating an opportunity to really look and see the change, all this wonderful change that I really hope for isn't going to happen just by hoping. Some positive steps and actions will need to be taken. But that needs to come from a place of real clarity, real balance, from a place of reality, not just from my programming or my wishful thinking or from where I am. So I think really the work now is just being quiet, trying to listen, just listen in stillness.
Hi, my name is Izzy Winkler, and I am an integrity coach and the co-founder of West Lexham in Norfolk, UK, an eco-holiday and retreat centre where we host workshops, symposiums, and holidays for families, groups, and individuals who feel like reconnecting with nature and each other. In many ways, what's going on now is something I've been building up to. I travelled globally in 2009 to 2011, studying the prophecies of a number of different indigenous tribes regarding these times post the end of the Mayan calendar. More recently, I've been studying with Joel and Michelle Levy, who are neuroscientists, teachers, and spiritual elders, learning how to stay grounded and aligned in VUCA times. I had never heard the term VUCA before. It stands, for those others of you who don't know what it means, it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and was originally used to describe war zones before being picked up in managerial language to represent a state that needs to be planned for. It seems that time is well and truly here now, and even with all the prognoses in my work around resilience, it has still caught me off guard. I put out some coaching content at the beginning of lockdown on YouTube called The Quarantine Coach to pass on my knowledge around managing anxiety, negative beliefs, and behavioral patterns. I soon felt like a fraud, though, as I was barely able to stick to my own advice. Our team are furloughed, my husband and I are drowning in client emails, homeschooling, and trying to work out where to go from here. It's been a time to look very closely at where things are not working and how we can improve as individuals, as leaders of the business and the community. West Lexham has always been value-led, wanting the best for our environment, our team, our clients, wanting to be an example of how things can be done lovingly, carefully, without compromising beauty or even the bottom line. And yet, we are still a way off from where we would like to be with this, and it's been a great moment to do an integrity audit. How strong are our boundaries? How consistent our behavior? How well do we stick to and represent our values daily? It is an opportunity now to look at all the systems, conscious and unconscious, that determine our lives and align more strongly with what is right. This is a time to find and address our blind spots so that we can build systems for the future that are free of inbuilt bias. The desperate need for this is proven by the social justice movement currently sweeping the world. I'd been listening to Amisha's podcast for a while, but it wasn't until her interview with Lola F. Saad that I picked up the phone and congratulated her on her work. I think this was because it was the first one that made me feel truly uncomfortable. A blind spot had been exposed. Somehow this led to her sharing her lockdown with me, and the conversations we've had have inspired me to start the Me and White Supremacy workbook today, so I can become aware of what else I'm missing. It is time to turn ourselves inside out, look into all the cracks and shadows. We are moving into an era where doing nothing is equivalent to being complicit and holding back the positive changes that are needed to deal with all of the emergencies on this planet. It is time to answer these questions. What will I put my name to, my voice? What will I stand up for?
Hello there, the future is beautiful people. My name is Ria and I live in Melbourne, Australia. I've been in ISO by myself. Hasn't that been delicious, everyone? Parts of it have, actually. There's been some guitar playing and I actually did an online Zen retreat with my Zen group, which was beautiful. I settled into my space in this exquisite way because I was so present in it and really actually fell in love with my little apartment. Touch deprivation has been a real thing. I actually did something a bit saucy in inviting my friend, my male friend who's 14 years younger than me to come walking down the creek with me, and he also lives alone, so you can imagine what happened next. So yeah, we had a very beautiful tryst, and that's over now, and that's all I'll say about that. And I'm just so grateful, and feeling a little bit pleased with myself for having had a tryst. What else could I call it? With a beautiful younger man. So I am working from home, like many, and I'm a policy lawyer, trying to keep women out of jail and get women out of jail in this bizarre kind of environment, given how vulnerable they are. They already were, and deeply grateful that I have a good and interesting job that I can do from home. My sister and my brother-in-law and I have been meeting on Zoom every Sunday for lunch with our dear mum. Mum is living alone. She's 80, and our dad died 6 months ago. So that's not been good for her, as you can imagine. And I realised probably a week and a half ago that she's in a really deep depression, and she's kind of given up, or she's giving up. And so I was in my apartment late one night, having been racing around all day, and I thought, just sit still and see what life is asking of you. And I sat on my sofa and just breathed for just a moment or two, and found myself standing and walking over to my computer to book myself a ticket to come and live with my mum. And it all happened in such an automatic way that it also almost took my breath away. So I got a pass through across the borders. This incredibly new Stalinist world that we live in. One has to get a pass across the borders, and it was actually all pretty easy. And I caught a flight, socially distanced in stupid ways, because I was just sort of half a metre from the person in front of me, and yet, a metre and a half from the people beside me. So, all I had to do was be sick and sneeze all over the person in front of me, which I wasn't and I didn't. But anyway, isn't it all so nuts? I flew from Melbourne to Brisbane, and my mum picked me up from the airport with my nephew, who lives next door with his family, my brother and his wife and their kids. And we came back here, and now I live with her, and it's been a week, and she was at a point of depression where she was wondering why she should even eat. And she's losing mobility really fast because she can't do aquarobics 3 times a week anymore. And she's deeply sad, and I feel really choked up even talking about it. But she's super happy that I'm here. I go between feeling like Florence Nightingale, who's going to make everything right, and also wondering what the fuck happened to my life. So I have a new and profound respect for carers who make a world of caring for someone else, or putting someone else at the center of their world. And so it's just been a crazy time. It's been a crazy time. I wish I had some wisdom to offer you. It feels really cool to be perhaps reaching out to across the corners of the globe, which this beautiful show does. I guess all I really have to say to finish up is a sense that I feel really lucky. I have a job, I have a home, I have love in my life. I'm living with my mum now, and sometimes the dog next door comes over, so that's sweet too. And I'm also aware of others in really just desperate circumstances. There are many, many in really desperate circumstances. So I feel scared, and I also feel grateful that I'm okay, and that I'll be okay. And I hope that you are too.
I'm Jess. I have a very small business and help other organisations tell their stories through animation. I love hearing and telling stories, hence I think the drawing to the podcast in the first place, and that have really resonated this kind of desire to be outside more and in space more and doing things a little bit slower. Been growing vegetables, which I've never done before. I've really appreciated the curiosity of the opportunity and possibility of becoming a little bit further away from the society that we're in, and space seems to be a really big part of that. Space and light and flowers and plants are coming up for me a lot at the moment, which I've really enjoyed. And then just this reflection around this rebalancing and COVID actually being something that I'm finding myself feeling quite grateful for in a strange way, and feeling kind of guilty about saying that at the same time, because obviously there are thousands of people really suffering right now, millions of people really suffering right now. So it feels quite selfish to necessarily feel grateful for something that is causing so much pain to other people. But around this kind of element of Mother Earth rebalancing, it feels like we're at a space in time, whatever time we're in, where actually we need to pause, we need to reflect, we need to not just carry on going in the direction that we're going. I think this is a really amazing opportunity to think about the other side. Once we get out of it, the other side of lockdown, this kind of, it's being seen often as this kind of before and after, but it feels like it's going to be much more gradual and a much slower return to whatever space we find ourselves in. Being quite optimistic about what that is. And I've had some really interesting conversations with people that I wouldn't necessarily have imagined having these sorts of conversations with in the last few weeks. It feels that there are a lot of people really open to this new normal, and that feels really inspiring. I'm quite an optimistic person, but it can be quite hard to hold on to the concept of hope all the time and to not feel a little bit concerned about coming out of lockdown too quickly and just returning really quickly to what we had previously, which clearly wasn't working. My biggest anxiety is that we won't spend enough time in this weird, unique space that we're in right now. We'll quickly reset to our old habits.
I'm Harriet. I'm in County Durham at the moment. We were meant to sell the house and leave to go and live on a permaculture farm in France 4 days after lockdown. It just didn't happen, and the couple who are buying the house are in the higher risk category, and so we really are happy to wait, and very lucky to be in a beautiful house in the Pennines where it's quiet and it's beautiful, and we've got a lovely garden, so we've been able to watch spring coming. And there's been so many gifts in this time. It's made me weep constantly. I've really found some understanding of that spectrum between being so safe and so in love with the world, and understanding that there's a bigger picture happening, and then recognizing also that there is so much personal grief happening as a collective, to understand our relationship with the death process and what happens, and open up that conversation. And I've veered in my own way between sitting on the bench in the sun and getting brown toes and enjoying myself, and then freaking out that I'm not doing enough. I actually quit my job the day lockdown happened, and so did my husband. So I've had that feeling inside. I've now trained to host death cafes online. I recognize that even in myself, I've got so much work to do in myself to understand what's going on. However, I do have experience in holding group circles and things, so I'm using those skills to be of help. But the death part of it is big. I'm not going to shy away from it. I still have so much baggage, even though I have experienced it on a personal level. I know I've probably got more experience in the avoidance techniques than I have in the actual dealing with it. And so I'm really conscious of that. Ironically, I started listening to the Future is Beautiful podcast when I was working as a fines officer in the post-excavation site of a post-Roman cemetery where there was lots and lots of Anglo-Saxon burials that were coming out, and I was processing the remains of humans. It in itself is also part of my understanding of of death and connection to the land and what it really means to be connected to the land, and the rites of passage, the rites of understanding what happens when we inter someone. All of that has come into question in this liminal time for me. And I think actually, ironically, weirdly, the Future is Beautiful podcast has accompanied my understanding of that whole death and ancestral process. So I'm really conscious of both the gifts and the pain. And I just want to finish by saying that I happened to meet a neighbor the other day. He just said to me, he said, "This is such a gift, but what a price. At what price is this gift?" And, we're sitting here safe, and I totally understand what he means. And so it's holding those both truths at once, which I'm definitely becoming better at.
Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the Global Patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members, and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation.
My name is Andre Pravin-Vashist, and I'm with my son Avery today. We're in the forest, by a creek and trees and birds and the earth. And, in this moment of reflection with Amisha, I suppose, in this concept of the future is beautiful. And the reason why I got attracted to the future is beautiful, because I wanted to see other people, meet other people, listen to other people that were possibly living that future, not only exploring it. Because I was looking for inspiration, looking for hope. And interestingly enough, right before COVID hit, some friends of mine gathered together, and one of my friends, he convened us in this concept of probing utopia. And we gathered as couples and individuals in his home with his partner, and we would imagine what are other possible futures. And we would put them on a board, and we talk about, what if schools didn't exist? What if people could only drive bicycles? What if, and we put all these on the board. And the first one we explored was actually, what if schools don't exist? And this is pre-COVID. And we went into this kind of special room, and we had this beautiful ambiance, and we dreamed for a moment together. When there's no schools that existed, there was a lot more reliance, interdependence on each other in a community setting. We had to be the teachers and the parents and the community members all at the same time. And we also found ourselves dreaming of, sharing a farmland together and other kind of concepts that just stemmed from one idea of, what if schools didn't exist? And then a month later, schools don't exist because all the schools in our community are being shut down. It was a moment to think about, okay, well, this actually might be possible to be in this future for a moment. And that we're actually not in control of that future to some degree. The future is kind of showing us a path that we could explore. And so we explored it, and we started thinking about, okay, what would it look like if we were working together to come up with that possibility after the COVID? And so we gathered again and we talked about what would it feel like if we shared land together, if we did other ideas, and we're still in exploration. I always look to the. And I think that's a beautiful story right there, what Avery sharing with us, is that we all are kind of striving for a particular direction. And I just try to show him a different direction, but he knows where he wants to go. And he has a commitment to where he wants to go in this moment, which is climbing a rock in this forest. And this moment has shown me is that I'm also recommitting to a certain direction in my life. It's recommitting to some values that I really hold dearly to myself. And one of them is to take care of my son, to teach him, to be his teacher, to be his guide. And I've taken a bigger role in that over the last couple of months, being responsible on a daily basis for what he learns with my partner, his mother. That's been a gift. It's a gift that I would not have really fully explored without this moment. And a gift I don't want to lose to some degree, you know? And I want to continue nurturing. And I think also Avery had a chance to see me in that light too for the first time, because there was no teachers. There was no school to go to. It was home. So that's one of the kind of gifts of this time that I know comes with so much pain and grief and loss. That spirit of pain and grief and loss is also important, because what I also learned in this time is that there were certain things I wasn't ready to let go of. And I was forced to let go of. And I think that taught me a lot, because in the future of beautiful, what the gift is, it teaches us new ideas, new perspectives. But when you put that on an existing infrastructure of ideas and lifestyles, it's too much. It's chaos.
Piece off.
And this is a beautiful moment where he's asking me to take these things off. Yes, Avery, I'll take that off. So in that spirit, Amisha, thank you. Thank you to the Future is Beautiful community. And I'm just thankful for this moment to share with you. So gratitude. Namaste.
Thank you, Andre. And thank you, Avery, for lending us your daddy for this time.
You're welcome.
So my name is Jennifer Brody, and I am speaking to you from Nova Scotia, Canada. I've been connected to the Future is Beautiful podcast for almost since the beginning, I would say, and have been really delighted by the conversations that Amisha has been sharing on the podcast. I was trying to remember that list of topics that you have connected: spirit, science, politics, and I think there's one more that I'm not remembering. You know, that you have touched a node that's really important and that doesn't usually get brought together. So I've really appreciated that. And I've been trying to do that as well on my Transition Times blog, which I have been writing since 2011, which is when I woke up to the climate crisis. First was just freaking out and scared and worried, amazed that everybody else seemed to be really oblivious, which is, of course, not true, but it was my perception at the time. So I started writing that blog out of that angst and have kept going with it all these years. In the new year, this year, I started a series that I called 21 Questions for 2020. And when I started it, coronavirus was not a thing. COVID-19 was not a thing. So I was just asking big questions about the period of transition and change that I felt we were in. Then, as you know, in the month of March, the COVID-19 crisis really hit. And so a lot of my more recent posts have dealt with that more specifically, but as connected to the environment in general and as connected to the larger climate crisis that we're in. I always try to what I call align the personal, political, and planetary. So I start from the personal. I always write in a personal voice. And then I try to move out through the political, by which I mean like our embeddedness in community, my embeddedness in various communities, and then out into the planetary, which is my connection to the Earth community, trying to move in those realms. And I think Amisha does that too beautifully on the podcast. I think writing has been my way to steady myself, not let my perspective get swept away by those loud voices on the media that have been rather hysterical in the past few months. I have, in the past few weeks, been writing kind of directly to Mother Earth. I've been writing from a more Gaian perspective and kind of reaffirming my connection and my commitment to the Gaian community writ large, and understanding that coronavirus is a strategy of Mother Earth to rebalance. And it may feel like the enemy, but in a larger perspective, maybe it isn't, So I try to keep in mind Joanna Macy's idea of deep time. Like many people, I've been interested in exploring death. What is death all about? This has been a topic that's been emerging in, many areas now, just coming to terms with death, accepting death, trying to understand what comes after the death of the physical body, looking into the spiritual realm. So I've been doing more of that inquiry. It's not necessarily showing up in my writing yet, but it's behind questioning mind, open mind, that I'm trying to keep through this crisis. The title of the podcast has been very reassuring to me. I have always loved the title. The future is beautiful. It is. It will be. And what it may look like may be very unfamiliar to us. We may not have a place as human beings in this future, but we will have a place as Gaians in the Earth community. In some way, somehow, I hold fast to that more than hope, the kind of trust that's implicit in the title of the podcast. The future is beautiful. Each of us contributes to that beauty and can help to make it so. Every time I sit down to write, or I do author coaching, and I work with a lot of people, I'm a teacher. In everything I do, I try to reaffirm my commitment to contributing to a beautiful future. And I think if each of us does that, it will be so.
Hello all, it's Amelia Donkor here, and I wanted to share some thoughts I had this morning about privilege and the prevailing wind of privilege. Last year I read a brilliant article about class privilege, and it introduced me to a concept of a following wind supporting people through their lives and careers. This language supported me in conversations with people who felt uncomfortable about their own privilege. Yes, I was privately educated, but I didn't like it, or my parents had to work so hard to get me there, or I still had to do the work. All of these things may be true, and yet the privilege of this upgraded education no doubt pushed and galvanised in myriad ways. The privately educated person may still have suffered many hardships in life. We're all human, and yet the prevailing wind of privilege pushed on. Looking at white privilege right now, it seems a handy metaphor. Being white does not mean that you have not suffered discrimination. Being white intersects with many other life variables, but whiteness is the wind that you may have never noticed. Whiteness is the wind that has pushed you forward and has held so consistently that you may not feel the breeze. But it's there, from birth. For non-white people, they press against that wind every day in differing ways. Some surrender to its weight, some find shields, collective windbreakers, or battle through the storm. We are all individual hearts. We will all have different stories, but if you're questioning the validity of white privilege with a, but I, or, and what about, know that these individualistic stories can be true and authentic. Also know that the wind keeps blowing.
Hello, my name's Maxie. I'm 33. Before lockdown happened, I was being a live-in carer. What I see now is I was living in survival mode, really not living from my heart, making panicky decisions, thinking I had to do things because I didn't have certainly not enough options. Coming out of lockdown, I feel a world of difference. It has been such an experience of learning from the inside. Sometimes when our choices get taken away, we see how much we already have, because we can't compare it to all the things we think we could be doing or should be doing, or Instagram or articles. So it's been very cool to see that when your choices are really limited, how much there is of other things. So I love to travel. I finally had this job as a live-in carer, which means you spend 1 week with people looking after them, and then you have 1 week free. And I kind of got that job because I wanted to travel so much, and it didn't happen like that at all. The people I was working for were really ill, and it was end of life care, and I was so exhausted I never got to go anywhere, and then lockdown happened. So I didn't realise how stressed I was, and sort of at the end of my tether. And then I got stuck in this actually kind of cool situation in which a friend had organised for me to house sit in an area I don't know very well in Hampshire. It was just sort of at the end of winter, beginning of spring. And her family took me in-ish. We sort of householded together. So they said, look, don't go back and forth and do caring. You can do what you really want to do, which was starting a business with my friend, like a creative business. We'll cook your meals for you. So I just had this paradise at the beginning where really felt looked after and held and safe. And it was this massive unpeeling of all these layers, which I had no idea of how much pressure I had been feeling, putting on myself, and sort of feeling I had to go forward by myself on my own and had to look after and do everything myself. And all those stresses came off kind of fast, actually, and I really felt them. And at the beginning I was quite in awe about it, like quite thrown about by the power of all these emotions that were rising, and just this like, it's just this feeling of sort of sinking in deeper and deeper. And then I remember like a few weeks in, I had this sort of panic, like, oh my God, what if it's not long enough? Because when I felt just the beginning of sort of touching that piece, it's so perfect. Didn't feel like I would be able to fully embrace it and sink into it. Then I felt so sensitive. I started to feel sort of panicked about re-entering society, and it'd given me this lens of seeing relationships with such perspective. And then I sort of felt worried about re-entering into those relationships, and I felt so sensitive. And jobs, and just thinking like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Then suddenly spring started really kicking in. On Presence Collective with Amisha, we had really nice calls about foraging, and I started reconnecting with the land, which was magic. I remember hadn't had any male influences or anything for ages. And I was walking under this path, smelt this amazing sort of pheromonal musk, and I was like, what is that? Found this little blossom, and I was just like, it really felt like the most sexy flower. And I was like, wow, this is really having a profound effect on me. And then we had our foraging call, and the invitation was to find a companion plant to sit with for that month. And I was like, gosh, I know mine. And I looked it up, and the hawthorn is supposed to be good for strengthening the heart and recovering from heartbreak, which was exactly what I'd been struggling with or going through. Also, the whole of the cottage I'd been staying is called Apple Tree Cottage, and it's got a load of apple trees in it, and they were just white and pink with blossom, and then that blossom was everywhere. So I was like, oh, I've got to listen to this one too. And I looked that up, and the flower essence for apple blossom is a 5-star of hope. I just felt that was what the messages the land was giving me at that time. So it was like resilience and strength from the heart, but also hope. The ground was just littered with this message of hope everywhere. And after that, I sort of began to feel stronger and more able. And then as soon as that happens, more stuff starts to pick up in life, and it's been a real rolling ball. So much has happened. I have picked up so much from the Future is Beautiful podcast during this time, and energy workshops Amisha's done. And also in my own life, so many things have happened. So many relationships have sort of peeled away, and really, really old ones that I'd forgotten about have popped up. And that's sort of the idea that has come out of being really connected to the seasons. And when all the blossoms did go away and they were all on the floor, I thought how beautiful, just stunningly gorgeous. And then I was like, oh my gosh, they're all gone. And I got so sad for a second. And then I was like, remember that that is the season, that has not gone forever. They will be back at some stage. And then think of all of the stuff that's under the ground and sort of in the branches of the trees waiting to come out that you can't imagine. There's no sign of it yet, but there is so much to come. I am feeling that what this time has given me in this pause, so much outer choices and possibilities have gone. Possibility of seeing people, of doing things, of travel, of all this inspiration that you usually get and sort of overload, that's all gone. And what it has given me is sort of an inner vision, or like I'm sort of imagining a camera inside of myself, one of the oscopies, clearing away so much emotional debris and seeing patterns of, seeing finally, well, I don't know about finally, but I had a falling out with a really lovely friend who I'd been staying with and her family, and after all this amazing collaboration, came to a point where this stuff bubbled out of nowhere, and it really took me by surprise and turned into an estrangement with two sides, thinking like, I can't believe they did this or think this about me, and the other side doing the same thing. And finally, when I saw my friend and we talked about it, as she said something which just clicked with me, and she said, well, of course, I value our friendship so much more than the business, this thing that we're doing together. And it was such a click for me, because I realized the lens that I'd been seeing all of our interactions through was one of lack of self-worth, of always feeling like an outsider, not feeling like I fit in and that I can bring my whole self to the table, that sort of I'm fit for a purpose and sort of can play that role, but maybe not appreciated for all that I am. Her saying that just really shone such a clear light on how long that has been with me since school, since I first came to England for school and felt like such an outsider. That was a huge shift for me. It's been really nice to talk about that to lots of people, and those conversations have been showing me how much my position has been coloured from my perspective and my experience and the lens of my experience, really. And then it's given me loads of empathy to see how everyone else's is coloured by the lens of their experience and their trauma and their story, those threads which they've woven into their own tapestry. Like, we're all choosing the threads and choosing the narratives all the time. So at the moment I feel kind of clear inside, and I can see so much with so much perspective that I hadn't seen before. I'm not yet feeling ready to pick up the threads again and to weave my narrative and to know which way to go, and I'm kind of wary of everything's a story, isn't it? Everything is a choice of which anecdotes and which bits, which memories you choose, what becomes your reality. I'm so enjoying the peace and the quiet and the non-narratives. I'm so enjoying not listening to the news. I'm so enjoying not hearing other people's opinions. I've finally gone home for the first time since lockdown and seeing my family again, being in those relationships that were giving me trauma. We haven't small talked once. It's so nice. But we have hugged, and what I'm finding so much peace in right now is not wanting the world from everyone, of just appreciating what they can offer. So at the moment, I don't need anyone to be perfect. I don't need any relationship to complement the whole of me or see the whole of me or like fit with me perfectly. I don't need any perfection. What I am loving at the moment is just the joy of a hug, the joy of a shared meal, or showing people the springtime tonics I've been making, or recipes, or flowers and all the amazing things we've noticed from spring and summer, all of those things, all of that shared experience, all of that shared peace, shared reverence, respect, from humbleness that's come out of this shared experience and this shared springtime. Has anyone ever felt so in tune with all the cycles? So that is what I'm experiencing at the moment, and I'm just enjoying so much, is not asking anything or like trying not to ask. Of course I'm still asking loads, I'm sure, of people, but being more humble and more grateful for the amazing things and gifts that I already have in my life, the people I already have in my life, the relationships, no matter if they are broken and traumatic and no one feels like home for me at the moment. That's not true. I'm at home now and it's feeling like home. The earth is feeling like home.
Hi, everybody. I am Kiran, also known as Dr. Kiran. I work in London. I lost my dad about 20 months ago, and I approached Amisha for the mentoring program. It was amazing. Amisha really held me through that space. So more recently, I'm an anaesthetist. I work on intensive care, and that has been my role during this pandemic, working in one of the London hospitals. My experience in the last few months has been a lot of death, actually. I'm aware that a small proportion of people end up in hospital, and an even smaller proportion of people end up in intensive care that end up dying. But that has been my personal experience, and I haven't had a lockdown experience in the way some of other people have. I've not had an extended period of time off. I've been working 4 days on, 4 13-hour shifts on, and then 4 off. But this week I have had a week off, and I've had a lot of time to do some deep processing, a lot of meditation, some personal practices. A lot of stuff has come up for me. So from a personal point of view, things about kind of dad's grief that I hadn't really dealt with. So I've just let myself experience those emotions. And before, I think I suppressed them, but I've just kind of really, really faced them and just let, if I needed to cry, I've just let things come up. Whereas before, I think I was just a bit afraid to do that. And then giving some appreciation for his actual loss. And because that was the beginning of my transformation. I've changed in huge amounts of way. It kind of was the beginning of my spiritual path, and instead of focusing so outwards, it made me really turn my focus inward, like start to listen to what was coming from my heart and my intuition, things that I didn't even really know what that meant before. Very like science minded and practical and evidence-based. So it really allowed me to kind of explore some really deeper things. I've gone down a huge like spiritual journey. And with that, I have seen how much healing potential there is in not just how we do stuff in the West in terms of healthcare. And I know there's a lot of talk about holistic therapies, and there's some amazing things going on out there. But being in Western medicine, I kind of know that some of that is perhaps not really taken seriously for whatever reason. It's not fully integrated, but it's really made me realize how much, if we had an integrated way of bringing, like, whether it's traditional, ancient wisdom into modern day healthcare, we could do so much. So that's helped me develop a bit of a focus for what I want to do, having kind of one foot, as it were, in a Western medical community, but also one foot in the spiritual community and, alternative holistic therapies. What I see as potentially what I do see as my purpose. But the other thing that's really come up as well is this concept of death. and how in the West we're so afraid of it, and we don't really talk about it. And I've seen it in hospital, like people coming in and they have this whole idea of like war on death. I must defeat death. And then as a result, they have this unrealistic expectation of what we as medical practitioners can do. And this can perhaps lead to what I, see as not a good death, whether you're on a ventilator or whatever it is. I guess that's your own personal view as to what constitutes as a good death. For me, it's it's how my dad died. He had all his family around him. He wasn't on any sedative medication. He was still with it mentally, and he passed in a very, very peaceful manner. And I think it's really important that we start talking about death a lot earlier to help people become empowered to make their own decisions about what they want. And that's a difficult thing to do, because then you really have to ask these big questions like, what is death and what does it mean? And is it the end? Before I used to very much think when you die, your body shuts down and that's it, game over, but my whole attitude to that has completely changed. And it's not the end, which energy, and there are so many things I can say about that, but that's just my own personal view. But what I would really love to see is for it not to be such a taboo subject, and for us to really openly discuss it. And then I think that becomes really helpful for people who do go through grief. When I lost my dad at the age of 31, I didn't have none of my friends had really been through loss or grief. And I found it an incredibly lonely journey. That's why I reached out to Amisha for mentorship. And friends tried to be there, and they were trying to reach out, but they just didn't know how, because it's just not something that's discussed. So if we did have more conversations about it, then it can only be an amazing thing. The one thing that is certain in everyone's life is that we're going to die, and we just don't talk about it. And when we're faced with it, it's like war on death. We must fight it, instead of, how about embracing it and turning it into a beautiful thing, which it is, if you can change your perception of it, if you want to. Like I said, so this week has been like a deep process for me. I've been up and down, and I personally am very grateful for the pandemic. I know that sounds kind of weird to say, but it's made me stop. It's made me think. It's made me just reevaluate. It's much bigger than I can even perceive, that there's something just much, much greater happening here. And it's about what learning and what growth you yourself can take from it, and what we can take collectively. And that is still to be seen, to kind of really start to take an appreciation of holistic healthcare. And I'm not the first one to say it. There's so many amazing people out there doing it, whether it's spiritual practices or whether it's other things like dancing. So I've been doing a lot of ecstatic dancing. Like, who talks about ecstatic dancing in Western medicine? But getting into your body and being able to move your body when you're going through grief, it is such an amazing thing. But no one talks about that, And what what Western medicine needs to change is like evidence and research, which is one of the things that I'm gonna, is my aim to help provide. The thing I was going to say is just, I hope it can be a catalyst for change, for people to really start to take responsibility for their own healthcare, and not this Western system where you go to a doctor and they tell you what to do. I think that's useful in a lot of situations. So like, I'm an anaesthetist. If someone needs an emergency operation, that's where Western medicine is great. But with all the other things, from nutrition to exercise to things like singing and community and all these other things, I really hope it's a time that we can just start to have a much more holistic approach to healthcare and to everything else. So if you're experiencing some sort of beauty and awakening from this, then that is okay. Even the fact that you've got an appreciation of everything else that is going on shows that you're feeling the connectedness. And I don't necessarily think this transition out of whatever we're going through is going to be an easy one per se, but It's about the people who within it who are finding their inner light and are finding the light within the darkness and embracing the shadow, but using the shadow to find growth, that are going to be the helpers and help the other people who have the attitude of, oh, what's going to happen to our taxes, out of this situation. So ultimately, I do see it as hopefully a positive thing.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm in Hastings in the UK. I think every week it's like something else, another layer has fallen away each week. It's about like this kind of gradual unfurling, kind of falling away of, shedding of what isn't needed anymore. Because I know that I often do experience this in spring anyway. And I remember really distinctly having that sensation, that kind of understanding of things this time last year as well. So maybe it's more a case of just having the opportunity to be slow enough to see that. And I was in gradually over the last, ever since I've been old enough to work, I've been trying to shed the kind of, get away from the normal way of working. It's always something I've been very intent on avoiding. Working in an unusual way. So until just before lockdown, I was working as a live-in carer for 18 months. And so a lot of my lockdown experience has been about kind of processing that quite strange experience. And I was always going to have a couple of months as well, like at this time for, I wasn't in any hurry to get another job. So actually it feels like, a real gift. It creates a bit of anxiety in me when I feel that I'm not like in the same flow as everyone else. Kind of going against the predominant flow around you. It feels like it takes a lot of energy to go slower than everyone else. So I really appreciate it. I feel like I go a lot slower than most people anyway, and process things a lot slower. So I feel like I'm not nearly done. I feel like I'm just getting into this, and I feel like so many people, you can tell they haven't even begun letting themselves stop. I've been doing this morning dancing, and one of the lovely things, kind of insights that's come to me through that is when each track changes, the lady who leads it, she encourages us to keep going with that momentum of, it doesn't just, when your body's moving with one track, that energy, it doesn't just stop dead. And if you allow it to keep moving, even though the rhythm has changed slightly, it's a gradual kind of adapting into the new rhythm. And that's been really nice to kind of observe the way this is playing out for everyone. It's like with so many people have got so much momentum has built, in this kind of incessant doing mentality, that everyone's addicted to. I suppose I'm thinking about my sister mostly. I know that she hasn't managed to stop yet, and it's like this momentum is still in her. She hasn't quite noticed that the track has changed. And I feel like we just need a little bit longer, or a few more track changes, which might be, I don't know, the equivalent of a few more weeks for people to notice. My concern is if we all go back to normal too soon, nothing will change. Like the learnings won't have gone deep enough, and that fear is also for me too. I feel like I'm still in the beginning stages of my sinking into myself, that I feel like this kind of safe space is allowing, through not having any pressure to be anywhere else, or even trying to look for a job.
I'm a To the UK Bingham, and I was on the podcast, and I live off grid. I'm in Spain, not in the UK. We haven't been allowed out of our homes. You get fined if you go out. Now, I should point out, I'm the lucky one. I'm off grid on a mountain, so I'm not in the worst scenario at all. But nonetheless, I didn't really see a human face for quite a while, and it's an interesting experience, a kind of dreamlike experience for a while, where I realised how important, because I'm a bit of a hermit, I realised how important human connection actually is, and how when you don't see people anybody warm-blooded for a long time can get a bit trippy. I was also felt ready, I suppose, in a way which I saw a lot of, and that's the beauty of what this podcast, this community, I've always feel for me, it gives me an access point to the real world, an access point to what's going on out there, you know, because I can get lost up here. And I noticed with my other friends as well, I understood, it suddenly hit me. I see why the system can't break down. It wasn't clear to me before. Why is everybody in that world? Why would they stay in it? And then it started to become clear to me. And I really felt like the virus, we almost co-created it with the planet. So many people wanted change, but they didn't know how to get out of their addictions. And I include myself. I still drive a car. I mean, it's an addiction also. So it was really interesting. I felt like it was almost co-created in a very kind of, in many ways, if you think about Jem Bendel's predictions, this is so gentle compared to what could still hit us if we continue along the kind of destructive vein that we were in. Yeah, and change never ever comes without a price. That's also true. What I did feel was, oh my goodness, I'm ready. I don't feel panicked at all. I've lived in Turkey for 20 years. There was never any security. I've never had any money in the bank. So what changed for me? Nothing. I have nothing to lose. I have a bit of earth and I'm carrying on and I'm ready. I feel psychologically ready to give something for the next step. I have this lovely Patreon community. And so I put it to them, how can I support? And I felt ready. And it was very interesting, the kind of responses that were coming in. And I started to understand how to bridge the gap between the system that's breaking down now and a simpler, more beautiful life, which actually doesn't cost very much money. There's a kind of illusion that you need to be wealthy to do this, and I don't buy it. I mean, I'm not. It's actually very, very, once you start taking away all the extraneous extra addictions, then it gets very cheap to live like this. It started to become clear to me where the issues were, and I realized I was getting a lot of things like, I don't know how to structure my day outside the 9 to 6. How do I do that? And it really, I went down such a rabbit hole with it. It's very interesting. And how can I talk to the earth? How can I connect with it? These kind of questions were coming up. So for me, it's been a really interesting journey of seeing now where it was very practical, much more practical for me. Like, right, I'm ready. I don't feel freaked out by this. I've kind of like set up for it. How can I now move in and step in and be of assistance or kind of do my thing? That's where it went for me. Personally, it was an interesting trip into isolation and realizing that actually I do quite like humans, which I needed to get to that point because I was feeling quite disenchanted with humanity for a long time and I needed to heal that. So that's good that that happened. And secondly, that I started to see how I could what my next step would be to kind of like help that. I'm so heartwarmed to hear people, pretty much everybody is getting something from this, with people from all levels, economic levels, I should say. I mean, one of my very good friends is a shelf stacker in Tesco, has been for 30 years and works the night shift, has done, all her life. And she was feeling very happy about it, saying, finally, people can stop thinking things grow on shelves, was what she said. And these are really, beautiful awakenings because if people haven't really been understanding where their food comes from and where their waste goes to, and hearing people gardening for the first time, so many people are doing that, cooking their own food. That's really, for me, very, very heartwarming and lovely to hear. And the way it's opened a gap for people to step out of something old and think about something new, a beautiful future. That is, for me, so, really very heartwarming to hear. That's my take on it from Spain, off-grid Spain. Oh, yeah, and I was going to say, talking of that, and I wondered how my own online platform and my work, what would happen, because I saw around me a lot of people obviously losing a lot of money fast. And I was quite prepared. I was sort of thinking, oh, well, this will be a good test for the Mud Home, Is it built for the future or not? Let's see. And of course it is. I think my YouTube subscribers doubled. Suddenly everybody's looking to build off-grid mud homes. Quite right. Good for you, mate. That's interesting to see people moving in those directions, because it could go any way. It could have gone any way. But it's interesting to see at least some part of the people are moving in those directions for a more free, less financially dependent, freer kind of nature-based existence.
Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. I rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way that feels in every way. It feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way. It feels right in my own soul. Rise up in every way. It feels right in my own soul.
Be gentle with the parts of you that are still realigning. We have been through an epic realignment of what it means to be a human, of what it means to be here in this body, in this interconnected web of activity and love and fear. We have been down into the deepest caves, and we have pulled up so much darkness into the light, so much that was unseen, that was given no attention, where there was no care, has been brought up so that we can see it, so that we can heal it, so that we can forge new ways forward, new ways that take into understanding why we're really here and what it is we want to create together. Can you open up to being an even clearer vessel, a vessel of intention and embodiment for what this new paradigm is offering us? Can you be centered in yourself, centered in your power, centered in your love, centered in your warrior? So as others that do not have the resources, either material or inside themselves, to carry forth in this moment so that you can lead, so that you can be a guiding light. And it happens through connecting deep into your presence, connecting deep, deep, deep into your soul, gliding through worlds seen and unseen, opening yourself up to be more. You can't play small in this new paradigm because we need fullness. We need that full embodiment of what you are, of this exquisite essence that came to be, that came into being in your body, with your name, with your story, that came to be in the place in which you found yourself born, in the place in which you find yourself now, with the wonders that you find available to you, be it time, be it money, be it access to incredible resources. That didn't happen by accident, but came through such kaleidoscopic and magnificent ways. Can you hold this? Can you stand and own this without a single apology for being here? Can you own that you are here and that you have something that you can offer that is going to support, uplift, heal, and transform those around you? It doesn't have to be grand. It can be simple and sweet. It can be loud and provocative. It can be all of those and every spectrum of humanness all rolled into one. Let the beauty of your soul guide you. Let the beauty of your soul shine through. Let the beauty of your soul extend through and out of your body into this world. You are here now, and it is perfection. You've weathered well through this storm. And now it's time to re-emerge, assess the damage, and rebuild. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?